Hello. Thank you for having me. I travel 9 months out of the year. And one thing that happens when you're away from home for 9 months out of the year is you spend a lot of time in the airport. And when I'm in the airport, I really look at it as a great opportunity to meet new people and make friends. And a few weeks ago, I was in the airport. I was talking to somebody I'd met, this woman who lived in a small town in Maine. And she was talking about her town, and I said, it must be nice to know everybody in your town. And she said she didn't. And she said she thought about the people she didn't see. And I started to think about that concept, and I started to think, that's what I do, is I travel around, and I think about the people that we don't get to see. In Kyrgyzstan, they have these buses, these little buses called marshrutkas, and they go up and down the main street. They're not much larger than a van, and they hold about 30 people. One time, I got on a marshrutka, and this old woman handed me her baby. So I held the baby, and we're riding, holding the baby. Bus stops and goes, people get off. I have the baby, holding it, and then the old woman is getting off the bus, and I'm handing her baby back, and she says, "That's not my baby." And I said, "Whose baby is it?" She said, "I don't know." So all of a sudden, I started to become a father. So I had this baby in Kyrgyzstan on a bus, and I looked in the back of the bus, and a young woman, she raised her hand, and she said it was her baby. I said, "Great." So I handed the baby to one passenger, and the baby made its way back to its mother. Now that seems sort of weird to me, but then when I started thinking about it, I thought, isn't it great that there's a place in the world where you can trust a busload of strangers with your baby? This is a young woman, a young girl, 14 years old. Her name's Hu Yan. She lived in a rural province in China until her father died in a mining accident. So her mother and her younger brother moved to Beijing. They moved there so her mother could get a job. The problem was her mother's job was on one side of Beijing, and Hu Yan couldn't go to school except for this one school provided by an NGO, non-governmental organization, on the other side of town. So Hu Yan, so she can get an education, what she does is she goes to school, and her mother comes home only 2 days every 2 months. She's the most responsible person, and she's really, really inspiring. And that's one of the great things about what I do, is I become inspired. About 12 years ago, I was having lunch in a little hut, a little mud structure in Afghanistan. This was before 9/11. And we were eating little dumplings. I was eating with a family. And when I was done, the family and I went out into the street, the road, which wasn't much further than 10 feet from the front door. And this girl was part of 300 people walking down the street. They were walking from one village to the next to avoid the Taliban. And what was really extraordinary about that experience was how quiet it was. These people were moving their lives, and it was quiet. This is a woman who works on a tea plantation in Darjeeling. I like to photograph the everyday activities of people because I think it's a great way for us to access and relate to the folks around the world. This is another kitchen. This is in a brothel in Kyrgyzstan. What happens is the women wait in the kitchen and take care of everyone's children while the women go off to be with their clients. Some photographs don't need any explanation. This is a hospital in Niger. The United Nations puts out something called the Human Development Index, the HDI, and it ranks all the countries based on education, medical facilities, literacy, mortality rates. And of 182 countries, Niger ranked at 182. They have a life expectancy of just under 51 years old, which is older than many countries, but they don't have the blight of AIDS. And they have a literacy rate, an adult literacy rate of a little less than 29%. This is a community in North Jakarta called Chillinching. It's on the North Jakarta Sea, and what's really fascinating about Chillinching is the entire neighborhood, probably about 20,000 people, all process shellfish. The families are brought up to harvest, steam, shuck, package, and chill shellfish. It's a really great environment to photograph in because there's no real difference between the man-made world and the natural world. It just sort of swirls around. And when you walk around the little alleys, your feet crunch on clam shells, and you keep your mouth shut so flies don't fly into your mouth. This is another town in Kyrgyzstan called Tashkumir, which roughly translates to Black Rock. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the coal mines in the town are only now operating at about 20%. So everybody's out of work. So these families would go through coal dust and pick out little nuggets of coal, put them in bags, and sell them. $3 a bag. It takes a day for a family to fill a bag. This woman's name is Grace. She works at, the color's back on, which is good. She works at the Kampala Boxing Club. She works at a boxing gym. Well, her job is to clean up after the boxers and prepare their food. This is a Carnival cruise. On the top deck, they have miniature golf. This is a kitchen in Darjeeling. And this is Chernobyl. This is a family of nomads in Niger. They sleep out under the stars. They don't have any structures that they sleep in. One thing that's really interesting about the way they live is they put all their objects in trees so that the livestock can avoid eating them. It's a really authentic life. All these communities have flow, as Dave McClain would say. I like that. This is a 14-year-old coal miner in Kyrgyzstan. He lives in a town called Kokjangak, which actually roughly translates to black apple. They coal mine in this town. There's 130 people, mostly kids between 14 and 25. And they go into the side of the mountain without any regard for geology, and they just crack open rock and bring it out, and they bring it down on mules. Of the 130 people who live on the side of this mountain, 10 people a year die. It's extremely dangerous. It's probably the most dangerous thing I've ever photographed. This is a town in the southern section of the Gaza Strip in Palestine. When I was there, an intifada was happening. So there's a lot of shelling. And this woman was just rocking her child back and forth to calm her baby that was crying. What was really interesting about the house was there was no electricity, but in between rooms there was a kitchen. And in that kitchen, there was no light except light that came through the cracks in a corrugated tin roof that happened from shrapnel, from bombs that had exploded. And this is Sofa. She is an orphan, and she lives in this orphanage in Tbilisi, Georgia. And one of the things that's really hard to do with development work is figure out what success indicators are. How can you measure somebody's happiness? How can you tell if somebody's really benefiting from what an NGO is doing? I asked Sofa, I said, do you ever want to go home? Her mother works as a prostitute at the train station in Tbilisi. She said, this is my home. Why would I want to go anywhere else? This is my family. So, what do all these stories have in common? One thing is, all the people in the photographs I've showed you, aside from the person on the Carnival cruise, has a real sense of community. Another thing that they have in common is they don't have the ability to pass on their story to other people. And I have notes. And everything that happens in these communities are everyday occurrences that happen around the world. Mass media is really good at reporting war, earthquakes, tsunamis, but they're not very good at reporting the day-to-day, things that happen every day, and how people have to get through each day. So what do we do? How do we tell stories? Well, the first thing we do is we look up from our iPhone and we engage in the world. We ride the bus. We acknowledge the people who aren't acknowledged. And then we tell those stories to people who can make decisions, decision makers. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm telling stories to people who can make decisions and get things done, because we all have the ability to do that. Thank you very much.